From it, he's Ali Alberigo, and this is the School Owner Talk podcast. Hello again, Dwayne Brummett with Ali Alberigo, SchoolOwnerTalk.com. Good morning, Ali, and we've got a special guest with us today, right?
Absolutely. Not just special, but a good friend of mine, and beyond special, because in my opinion, he's one of the better martial artists and legends in the martial arts in our modern day society. So I know he's a little reserved and shy about mentioning that, and he's humble, very humble. But yeah, he's definitely the guy out there that I really respect, and I'm honored to have him on our show.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get to ask some questions and stuff too. So you want to give everybody some background and then who he is and some
Yeah.
background.
Well, I'll do a quick introduction, and I'll let Hashi also explain a little bit about his history. But I know Hashi Duncan. We were both kids growing up in the martial arts, and we're similar in age. I think I'm older than you are, though. I think Hashi, I'm not sure, or we're close in age.
Yeah, very close in age.
I'm 58 right now. So and yeah, I've watched him. First off, his dad was a pioneer in the martial arts. I mean, has been teaching the martial arts, had taught since the early 60s, and demonstrated at the World's Fair. And I mean, when growing up, I would watch him from afar. I always dreamed about meeting him and being in his presence. And then down the road, I was able to get connected with another teacher who happened to be his student, my teacher, Shion Vasquez, who was a student of Sensei Ronald Duncan. And I was able to get to spend some quality time. And I think we became friends towards the end, where he would reach out to me and we would chat and go out for breakfast together. And I was always in awe, though. Like, I remember I was telling Hashi the other day that I did an interview with him, and it was not even an audio interview, but I recorded it just so I could write it down for the paper. And I remember being so nervous and so afraid, just because I was in awe of his presence. Like, I could even hear the interview and, in my head, the shakiness in my voice. And I was afraid to say something wrong, but it was just amazing for me to be able to have that time with his dad and over the years train with him. And of course, I watched Hashi Greg growing up too, and we watch each other and we're at seminars together. So it was just an honor being around him all this time and being a part of it.
Yeah, so I'm curious, how long have you been in the martial arts, sir? Like, when did you start? Was it, right out of the womb? Then your dad said, all right, we're good to go?
Pretty much so. My father always professed that, myself, my brother, and the rest of my siblings, well, more so myself and my brother, we were trained since the cradle, so to speak. But from my recollection, I was always involved in the martial arts. As Sensei Ali had indicated, we're both in the same demographic, the same age. We are the same age, actually. So you figuring, 5+ decades.
Yeah.
And it's just been part of my existence, always being around it, always having those types of conversations and being able to be exposed to the various masters and all the people that were considered influential. It's been quite a journey, but for me, it was just part of my fiber, being a part of it, to be able to exist in that realm of martial arts.
That's wild.
And then is there a particular style that you first got into, and like how has all of that evolved, especially, in today's world with grappling and MMA and everything else?
Yes. Well, coming up in that generation, in that era, the predominant studies of the arts was always predicated on jiu-jitsu, karate, judo. And, many of the other arts were kind of in the peripheral at the time. People who were cross-training and becoming very proficient. But the more popular art forms in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, of course, there was an evolution of popularity of the art. But to answer your question, I started off, my father introduced myself primarily into karate. And I remember doing a lot of the fundamentals of that, the traditional aspects of that. And of course, jiu-jitsu was something that we were always, speaking of as part of our curriculum, because we have to recognize my dad, his earliest foundation in the Asian arts was karate, judo, jujitsu. He was certified in Hakudo Jujitsu, Kindai Gakko. He got his earlier black belts in Kodokan Judo. He studied Goshindo Kempo with Naraki Hara and various. He was just a proponent of the art who loved the art like we do today. And so at that time, his thirst for just having that exposure as a traditional martial artist was something that he just was driven to do. And of course, he developed his interpretations of ninjutsu. He was recognized for that. But there was such a broad base, in the foundation of his art. So I say that because that was primarily my exposure.
Mhm.
And then, of course, as I grew and I developed in the art, being able to see and recognize and identify the importance of all the arts, I was a fan of so many different aspects of the martial arts. I respected so many of the martial arts, and one thing kind of led into the other, and I understood how the dynamics and the kinetics of movement all interrelated into so many different art forms. You follow? So, but the system, later on, my father had developed a system, recognized and identified as way to wins. So my dad passed away in 2012, and myself and my brother Ron Jr. have become the successors of that particular system. The system, in my mind, and as I'm very transparent about it, is somewhat eclectic in the sense that it involves those traditional bases of the studies of jujitsu, karate, weaponry, and as practitioners, to me, it's very important, it's very critical that we understand that we must evolve as well. As time is going through, we have to stay relevant. So, my humble beginnings as a practitioner, I can say, was very much involved in the karate basis of the art. And then, of course, I just accumulated various types of concepts and studies as I grew into it.
Yeah.
Nice. So I know for me, like when I first started, it was one art, and I was not introduced to anything outside of that one art. And it
Yes.
was a whole new world when I saw, after about 6.5 years of being in that one art, there's so much more out there. So for
Right.
you to grow up with, with that as opposed to being pigeonholed, that's just amazing.
Yeah, I feel that I was very fortunate. I can't say I took it for granted, but now that I look back in reflection of the exposure that I was allowed to have, it was pretty special.
Yeah.
Growing up in the art was very special. It wasn't something that was forced on myself, because I had other passions as a youth. I was an athlete and I ran track, did gymnastics, and so forth and so on. But that was always something that I realized that it was very special to me, to be able to be involved in the martial arts. And it wasn't my goal, my idea of being able to be a great practitioner per se, but it was just something that I was passionate and committed to doing. And once I recognized that, I could develop skill sets and that could catapult me into certain things in life, I thought that was very paramount. But being able to have the exposure, now that I think about it, it was pretty special, because I did have an opportunity because of the martial arts to meet a lot of people, to meet a lot of good people, and learn a lot. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I always talk about that with my students who are on the verge of quitting. And, I always say, you have no idea where this martial art will take you if you stay with it. Right. And like you said, I would say like 98% of my friends are people I met that
Yeah.
were due to the martial arts.
That's right.
I mean, I have old friends that I barely stay in touch with that were from high school or when I was in a band. But most of my dear friends are martial artists, and we have that same common bond.
Yes, that's right. Law
Yeah,
of attraction.
I know, right? It's true.
And sometimes it has the longevity that's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. So we had spoken a few weeks ago after Dwayne and I did our podcast, and we were talking about what we go through as martial artists, and business aside, and
Yes.
that junk aside, and making money and how to run a school and all that aside. We talked more deeply about the things we go through as a teacher. And you had reached out to me afterwards and said that it was it was interesting to you that we were speaking about it, because it's not really spoken about much in our industry,
That's
and
right.
how hard it is mentally and physically as a teacher to, for example, to raise a student since they were a kid, and then one minute they quit and you never see them again. And we
Right.
talked about these struggles and how hard it is to deal with that. Do you have any insight on that? I know that you're dealing with it too, and we all deal with it and so on.
I think that's very commonplace with a lot of instructors who I do speak with. That's something I've grown to accept.
Mm,
That's part of what we do. We've chosen to be instructors, and we're committed to being able to be impactful in people's lives.
mhm.
And from my perspective, I'm committed to being able to invest in people. So to your point, when you have those situations where people just kind of bail out on you,
Mm.
you do take it somewhat personal.
Yeah.
But then I've also come to the conclusion that that's just the journey that that individual may have,
Right.
whether it's 2 years, 22 years, whatever. But, you know, that's their journey,
Right.
and it's not for us to interfere with what their ultimate destinations may be. So, being able to supplement what they're doing, what they're able to achieve in life, in their journey, then in a sense, that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
you know, that's how it's supposed to be. But is a balance when you look at that from a personal perspective, because you're investing so much of yourself into students, whether
Yeah.
adults or kids. And the balance is also about, okay, now let's talk about the business aspect of it.
Right.
So you have, you're juggling that. It's such a juxtaposition that, you're looking at the psychology, and then you're looking at the basis of numbers. But I put the psychology first.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah.
see.
Do you find, I mean, and again, as you're talking, I'm thinking too about this. Like, I don't even know if a parent of a child or even a student would understand how we've connected with them. Like, in other
Right.
words, we grow to a point where we really look at them like family,
Like
and
family.
sometimes I think that I care about them and their benefit and them growing more than they do at
Yes.
times, and I really want to push them in directions to make them better because I could see their potential, and then they're gone. And I kind of sometimes feel a sense of loss, almost as if
Hmm.
you had a relationship, or boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, or whatever it is, and you break up, and now all of a sudden you can't talk to that person. You have a you
Right.
you you long to spend time with them, you miss them. I had one little girl, she was 3.5, 4 years old. I just loved her to death. Her name was Gracie. They stopped coming for a medical reason, but at the same
Right.
time I was so connected with her. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'm sorry, we can't do this anymore. And it's like,
Hmm.
my little, almost like a
Yeah.
daughter in a way,
You're
my
right.
little
Right.
3.5-year-old. So you miss them. So, like,
Yeah.
what do you suggest for people like that? Like, how do you deal with that as a master of the martial arts and a school owner? Do you just accept the fact that it's part of the job?
I've accepted the fact that it's part of the job.
Hmm.
Because part of which the recourse in all of that is that you have memories.
Right.
And as my dad would always tell me, as we teach, we learn.
Right.
So individuals who come into your path, into your space, and you're investing in them, teaching, you
Hmm.
kind of learn from them as well. You learn different little personalities and so forth and so on. But, I understand with anything in life, and like you stated, you develop relationships. And unfortunately, numbers tell us that a lot of relationships don't last
Right.
forever.
Right. Right.
They don't. We have good memories, of course, there's some bad memories as well, but, we try to hold on and go forward with those good memories, so to
Yeah.
speak. And I think that's part of the journey as being an instructor. I mean, the instructorship, we have to embrace that people are going to come and they're going to go.
I
Right.
know for me in the beginning, I took it to heart. I had to get
Yeah.
to a point where, kind of like what you're talking about, I just had, and I loved how you put it. I had a period of time that I could invest in that individual. Hopefully, I've done my best. They've gathered all the information that they needed to gather, and I just hope for the best after that.
That's right.
Yeah, and I love that. But it took me a while to get there.
That's right. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Because, we will take it personal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think I learned from my relationship with my ex-wife, and I said, when we had gotten to the point and we were getting divorced, we both had a choice. The common ground was we could be enemies and fight and hate each other and think of all the bad things, or we can work really hard on keeping our relationship happy and
That's right.
loving. And thank God we did that, because we have the best relationship ever. And not only for my daughter too, and so that we still to this day go out to dinner together and spend time together. But it took more strength to get over that.
Yeah.
And not being in the mindset of like, this is a battle now I need
Right.
to hate you or be mad at you, because even in my school sometimes people, they can't tell you how they feel unless they get angry. But they have to somehow find you at fault or get mad to be able to just express how they feel.
Yeah. Well, that's part of humanity.
Yes, it's true, right? It's the human mindset.
Yes.
So Dwayne, do you have a question? Or
No, I was just going to say, I think that's why exit interviews are so good with your students. I have a lot of them that most of them are reluctant. So I would say probably 60% are reluctant when they want to quit. And 40% are good to go with the interview at the end. But I just tell them, look, it's important for our relationship. I'm not having an exit interview with you so that I can talk you back into doing it unless you wanted me to do that. But second to that is, I don't want you to see me at the grocery store or see me out to eat or out in public and go, oh gosh, I can't talk to him because I severed this. So I want us to end on, common ground that we both care about each other. I mean, do you guys do something similar?
I never had any luck with exit interviews. Like
really?
People won't do them, like you said, for the reason that they probably think I'm going to try to talk them back into it, feel guilty about quitting and that kind of thing. So I've really we tried for years and no one really would ever do them. They would say, no, I'm good. I don't need to do that. But I think that's the hardest part, is communicating, right? That's difficult.
Right. I'd never really, I can't say, I guess organically it turns out to be an exit interview because fortunately I have some individuals who will come to me face to face and say, listen, this is my plans, and they're honorable to some degree. Well, they'll thank me for the experience, and perhaps, I let them know the door is always open. So I kind of always try to end it on those terms. And then of course, we understand that people just aren't going to do that.
Right.
Because, communicating from that perspective is very challenging. So, but when I do have the opportunity to have these types of exit interviews, so to speak, I make sure that they know that the door is always open for them.
That's awesome.
And there's a small percentage that eventually come back, they kind of go their way and kind of figure things out in life. And they realize, when I was there, it was a pretty good experience. Maybe I should circle back and revisit this experience in my life again.
Yeah. I always wonder about that, right? Like you wonder, did they leave and were they happy? Did they leave and they just had other things in their life? Did they enjoy what they did? And then I wonder, like, I'll see a lot of people that will have gone on and joined a different school. And I say after years, and instead of coming back to me, they'll go back to someone else. And I always wondered, why wouldn't they just come back to their roots and get started and continue where they left off? But I think it's about newness these days. Everything is new, fresh, and so on. So Hashi, where do you feel that the martial arts are going in the 21st century? I mean, I know that we chatted about this a little bit, about the classical side of the martial arts, the traditional, the sport aspect, the MMA fight game. Where do you see it, and what do you like about it, or not like about it? What do you think we need to do to change to make it better? I know that's a big loaded question with multiple questions in it.
Well, there's an old saying I always like to say, that you can never put the toothpaste back into the tube.
Mm-hmm.
So once we've gone down this narrative, this rabbit hole of being eclectic and evolving the martial art, that's where we are right now. So it's kind of like, do we adjust? Do we make our adaptations to make sure that we can stay relevant? But if we're committed to being a part of a tradition, if we're committed to being a part of a art form that speaks of traditional, what's defined as a traditional art, then then we have to keep that continuity. But I recognize that martial arts is a subculture within a culture, and we've had these conversations in the past where, as a culture, things are very fast paced, and sometimes when people get into what they describe as a traditional martial art, it takes time. There's a lot of time, there's patience, and I don't know if people have that type of time and patience anymore because you can get so much exposure. The medium is so different, than 1970, 1980, where you had to really put the time in to get that direct transmission and get it in the result. But now people are realizing they can get the same result, if not similar, without direct transmission. They can log on to something, they can go here, they can go there, and still get a result that they're satisfied with. Now, if you're speaking of the precepts that comes with what we define as traditional martial arts, loyalty, discipline, focus, integrity, all those things that I think are critical into the martial art. Does it still exist? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I mean,
depends on the school, right?
It depends on the school, but for me, I try to make sure that is paramount. It's in the forefront. And I'm very transparent about that. See? And as I made mention before, to some extent, there is law of attraction. There are people who really are attracted to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are people who really don't find that to be too attractive, so they're not going to be around too long. And the ones who, and you can always tell the ones who are not going to be around that long, because it's just a energetic thing that I kind of pick up on. And, and perhaps, the influences can kind of alter their state of thinking and how they perceive and how they accept traditional styles of training. And then sometimes you see people kind of making those concessions, and they evolve into that way of thinking and training.
Right. Do you feel that, so of course I've had many debates with different coaches and consultants in regards to what is tradition and what's valuable about tradition. And we've talked about, hey, why would you do this high block? It makes no sense, because they see things from a very limited perspective. Now, what I could tell you is I remember with your dad, I mean, he would defend himself with anything that you could defend. So one of his DVDs, which I still have, I believe it was Hodo,
the Art of Improvised Weaponry.
Right? Yeah. So he would, a Walkman at the time, which people probably don't know what that is anymore. But he'd have the cable and a book, an umbrella, a comb. Like he would find a way. And the reason why I bring this up is because there's that openness of mindset.
Yes.
Right. And I think there is a very closed mindset these days of like what's real, what works. Like, for example, one of my students, we posted a video of him doing some martial art technique, and the Instagram comments were like, well, yeah, but could he take a punch to the face? So him and I joke every time we post a picture of anything, whether it's a 3-year-old kid, Brian will post, but can he take a punch to the face as part of the precursor of the comments? But so I wonder, like, is it because people are not exposed to a wide variety and the history and the tradition and what martial arts used to be, and it's slowly disappearing, so that they really have no point of reference to know the reasons why these things are valuable? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there is adequate enough exposure because of the fact of the accessibility of being able to research and figure things out for themselves. But I think because you have the onslaught of contemporary stuff that includes octagon fighting and so forth and so on.
Right.
I think that kind of, in people's mind, they've defined that as being effective and realistic fighting and training. So what you're doing does not resemble that.
Right.
Or does not include anything that's going to allow you, because I'll see stuff that I think is valuable. Guys who are showing some real valuable self-defense applications, principles, concepts, and of course, to a certain extent, we speak in theory, but when you see somebody doing something that just makes sense, and then all of a sudden, you see an onslaught of comments like, well, will this work in the cage? Stuff like that, and I'm saying to myself, that's a limited scope. That's a limited scope of thinking. So I use that as a reference, because if teaching things or including concepts and principles that don't resemble what they see in the cage fighting or MMA or the sport arena, then it doesn't have as much value.
Right.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say then, with regards to that, Steven Seagal got hammered by people when he was teaching a front kick,
Yeah.
and just some, for lack of a better saying it, is, some variations or small little details to the front kick. Yet,
Right.
these MMA fighters and other people are like, he's just teaching a front kick. I mean, is that kind of what you're referring to as a limited scope of different techniques that can actually have a
Well,
deeper effect that, yeah, maybe they're not going to be utilized in the ring, but they could, like, you see where I'm going with
yeah,
that?
can I just add to that, and then Hanshi, hopefully you could answer in your opinion as well. I'm sure he and I, and by the way, we teach at an event every year called Masters Unite, and he'll teach, I'll teach, and we'll be out there in front of 100 or so people teaching techniques and little variations of each of our personalities and styles. Right?
Yes.
We'll
Yes.
teach the same move or maybe a variation of that particular move. But I have found that there's some people that are just doing moves that they work because their brute strength will make them work, but the
That's right.
technique is not there, whether it be a wrist lock or Seagal's front kick. Like, I've been kicked by him and knocked back 8 foot, and he didn't kick me hard. He just used the momentum and the power and the proper technique.
Right.
So sometimes we're not open-minded enough to even see it
Right.
as those little points are being taught. Does that sound?
No, I understand. Yes. I guess the nuances of technique.
That's a good term,
technical.
nuances.
Yeah.
From my perspective, because I'm not a big individual, so I've always believed in being technical.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, if you understand physics of what you're doing, then of course that's where the efficiencies come in. But we have to be truthful with ourselves. And
Right.
once we can identify what our limitations are, you see, I'm not going to try to sell you something that I don't feel that's going to be valuable for myself.
Right. Right.
So when you start breaking down, okay, what are we doing exactly? Are we expounding upon the realities of combat? Because now that's a whole different conversation.
Right.
That's a mindset. You see, combative measures and combative training is a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at how do we hang on or how do we expound upon traditional martial arts, then that's a different mindset as well. And from my perspective, the older I get, because we all understand as we get older, our physicality is going to be changing and diminishing.
Right.
So, and I feel that, okay, so what are the benefits at this point? Well, the benefits as an older practitioner is that you're getting a healthy measure of exercise, is giving you longevity physically. And now you're also speaking of the spiritual and the psychological dynamics that comes with martial arts training, especially this from a traditional standpoint. Because now, I don't know how many people still hold on to meditation and breathing and all these different things, and even practicing forms. We understand doing a kata may not be prescribed as combative, but there are combative elements within the bunkais of katas. But at the same time, as I said before, doing forms and over 55, 65, 70 is kind of like doing a crossword puzzle every day. Because now you're tapping into the neurology of your brain and all these things and helping you stay healthy and strong and give you longevity. So that's what I look at, because there's a spiritual dynamic that comes with the martial arts.
Right.
You see, and when you come to realities of what your limitations are, then you got to make your adjustments. Your adjustments is very psychological, and you have to be truthful to yourself.
Right.
You see, but now if you're solely basing what you do on combative measures and self-defense,
right,
all that stuff, now you got to say, okay, what adjustments do I make so this way I can still remain viable and still protect myself and protect my family and stand a chance against somebody who's 20 years younger than you.
Right.
But now you're looking at experience, you're looking at knowledge, and you're increasing your knowledge, and you're understanding that even psychological warfare is something that we have to pay attention to.
Right.
Because before you even engage with somebody, there's going to be a psychology thing that's going to go on. Somebody try to scare you down, look at you a certain way, size you up, and that could be intimidating. Am I right?
Yeah.
So even if you're talking about weaponry, somebody, a lot of times, as I was told, let's use a blade, for instance. The psychology of knife fighting, the first thing that's going to be intimidating is the blade.
Yeah.
And some people may say that a knife is probably even more intimidating than a gun. Because when you associate that knife, that steel, you associate what? Getting cut, going into shock, all those different things. So that could be a deterrent. That's psychological. You follow? But, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but the realities of what we speak of a contemporary training, we have to be very clear that is for contemporary purposes.
I love
Being
that.
able to pick up a weapon, being able to pick up a pen,
Yeah.
Your phone, all these different things. And that's the improvised aspect of the training that I'm accustomed to. Now, do I always teach that to everybody? No, because you have to be able to crawl before you walk.
Right. Yeah, that's valuable. I was thinking of one time when I was in Japan, Tanimoto Sensei explained ninjutsu and nimpo. The nimpo is the more spiritual side of ninjutsu. And he said, equate it to like a tip of a mountain. And he says, most people only use the jitsu and the techniques to get to the top. Once they hit the peak, they're done. They don't know, they can't go any further. But the nimpo is the spiritual side, the mental applications, all the things that you had just mentioned. And I think that's where a lot of people, they end their training at the jitsu, just the physical. They don't even realize there's a beyond.
Yes. Right.
That's incredible. Great,
Well,
great
and
answer.
kind of what you're saying too is, as we get older, yes, we have less physical ability compared to when we were 21. But with the experience, there's things like you said psychologically that we can see happening before they happen.
That's right.
Right.
And so it looks like we were amazingly quick or whatever, but it was just we were a step or two steps ahead because we've seen this before.
That's right. That's right. Yes.
So with that being said, you've probably seen some of the debates on Facebook or on Instagram where they say, when you stop training and you're no longer physically training, you're no longer a black belt. And I've always debated that because they don't take away your degree if you stop going to college, right? So you once a black belt, always a black belt. Obviously, if you want to physically stay a black belt, you would stay and train as much as you said with your limitations. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you feel like black belts should be tested for every certain years, or once you earn it and you stay engaged, you maintain? Like, what are your just thoughts on that philosophy?
Well, I think that's somewhat of a loaded question and answer, because in the simplest text, I would say, where the head goes, the body follows. So if somebody's mind is still in the game, you're still thinking about it and you're still focusing on the martial art, on the level of being a black belt. So let's say if somebody reaches black belt and they're very physically skilled, now they become disabled.
Right.
Or you're no longer a practitioner, or you're no longer a black belt. But the fact is, if you still have the wherewithal and you still have the cognition, and now at this point, can you teach?
Right.
Can you transmit? Do you have direct transmission? You see, and I tell it to people all the time, there's going to come a point in time in all of our lives, if we're committed to doing martial arts all our lives and have that, and we're blessed to be in it long enough.
Yeah.
Being it long enough where we probably are walking on canes and maybe need a walker or whatever the case may be, but we still can put a gi on and put on our obi. Right. But now we can teach. You can still transmit. Does that take away the fact that you're a Yudansha? A sensei, a Hashi, a Shihan, a Kiyoshi, Renshi, because there are limitations that will be there. So if somebody steps away from the art totally, I still say that they've achieved the black belt. You achieved it. You put in time. You can't take that time back from somebody. Right. But now what becomes interesting in this narrative, in this discussion, is when you speak of organization. If somebody's part of an organization or a system or a style, and then there is a period that elapses, then of course, it could probably create some breakdown, so to speak. Right. Because if it's about the longevity of a system or organization, okay, and it's about that, then people may have issues with somebody who steps away, But the knowledge base, that's there, and the evolution of the person, that's there.
Right. No, I love that answer. I think that's great. It's very similar to, academics. you get a college degree, you've always are going to have a college degree. You may not even practice in the field that you got the degree for.
That's right.
However, and you may forget a lot of it, but they can't
Right.
say you never got your degree.
Right. Right.
It all depends, I guess, on what the definition. There were people, and leads into another question I have for you is like, people put such a high value on black belt, and especially in the Western culture versus
Right.
the Eastern. Like I've been in Japan and I've watched fourth degree black belt tests, and they were basic tests. They weren't very impressive. And I asked the teachers, and they said, yeah, that we don't even feel like they're any value in the martial arts until their fifth or sixth dan, because that shows that they've been around for a long time and it became a part of their life. But in the United States, everyone says, oh, black belt. You've probably heard it. Oh, you're a black belt? I would love for you to be with me in the dark alley. You know, they think every black belt is the killer elite.
Yeah.
And we all know black belts that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, you know. So what do you think about the value of black belt? I know in your school it takes a long time to achieve it.
Well, the value of black belt, as we understand the definition of that, it's just, it's a white belt that never quit.
Right.
And of course, when you achieve the level of Yudansha or whatever, terms you want to use, depending on the origins of your system,
right,
whether it's Korean based or Japanese based or whatever the case may be. But from my perspective, I'll just use Japanese term. If you say Yudansha, which means you achieve black belt. So that means now you are now just ready to learn. Okay. And at that point, even when you reach first degree, you're not an instructor, you're not a sensei.
Right.
I mean, you can instruct and be an assistant instructor, but to achieve the title of sensei as an instructor, a teacher,
right,
the one who came before, then from my perspective, you're at least a third dan, and
right,
that takes some time. But I think the value of black belt, I think the definition of it, I think the perspective, the perception of it has changed.
Right.
Because there's so many people who are achieving it. You see, so, and you're getting younger people are getting it, and you still have that conversation like, well, is it worth anything anymore? There is value, because what's happening is that, you're investing yourself into something that you've achieved. You've achieved a certain level. Now, everybody may have a different take on what it means or what it takes.
Right, requirements.
The requirements, correct.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there has been some equity.
Right.
People have put in equity, sweat, and so forth and so on. You can only hope that certain standards have been upheld across the landscape. Like if you go to a tournament and you have a black belt meeting, as the person who's hosting that tournament hosts that meeting.
Yes.
Say, okay, we just could only assume that all the black belts have an understanding, a knowledge base that, okay, certain things are not acceptable and certain things we're looking for. And
right,
we have that wherewithal to decipher that.
Yeah.
So the same thing, I think expectations be there. And I guess there probably are and there probably aren't. But, it becomes a very interesting debate.
Yes.
And I like to always speak with diplomacy, because I don't want to be insulting to anybody what they perceive as being valid for them.
Right.
But
right.
I can only speak from myself, from my perspective, and the way
Right.
I was raised in the art. It takes a certain amount of time. And I think that there should be a certain skill set that's attached to what you're doing.
Right.
But at the same time, I do feel that, you have to look at the individual as to where they started. So I'll say this tongue in cheek. If you get somebody who cannot walk down the steps and chew the gum at the same time,
right,
and they just have certain disadvantages from a physical standpoint, you got to look at where they started.
Right.
You have to look at where they started. And you make a comparative from day one to where they are now, 4 or 5 years later, and you see
Right.
this transformation, not only in the skill set, but a transformation as who they are as people.
Right.
Their mindset, their discipline, who they are, how they conduct themselves.
Right.
You see, then that, to me, I think that has a lot of value, this factor there.
Exactly.
But going back to the earlier conversation about now, does somebody deserve to stay a black belt and blah, blah, blah. I think, even in universities, if somebody years later does something that quantifies as misconduct, they've taken degrees away from people.
Right.
You see?
Yeah.
And I think in the martial art community, that happens as well. If you have a certain standard of conduct, codes of conduct that's put into place, and people breach that. I think it is of the discretion of the instructor or the head of an organization that they can retract rank.
Right.
Now, rank is a little bit different than, okay, well, I've achieved the black belt. You can't take away that knowledge, but they have affiliation with organizations and dojos, then you have that right to retract that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Absolutely. So I often tell parents, because when they ask what they're perceiving as a discrepancy on one person being a black belt and another person being a black belt, I just tell them, one, you don't have the timeline I do. Two, let's just say we grade everybody on a scale from 1 to 10. We want black belts to be a 7. So when they test for their black belt, we want them to be a 7. And your child came in at a 5 already. And by the time they tested for a black belt, they're at a 7.
Yeah.
But this other kid came in at a -3. And by the time they tested, they're a +3. Who actually gained more?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And when I used to run tests in the early days, each test became more and more difficult. So first they had to run a mile. This test number 2, they had to run 3. By test number 3, they had to run 5.
Yeah.
And I got to a point where I finally realized, I said, these people are going to have to be superhuman or else they're not going to be able to pass a black belt. And I kept upping the bar. So I had to realize that there was a bell curve, that you're going to have black belts where I could put my head on the pillow at night and say he deserves it or she deserves it. That could be the bottom left-hand side of the bell curve. And then those super athletes are at the top right-hand side.
That's right.
The anomalies, the ones that are just so natural and their ability is such phenomenal. But not everyone's going to be at the same spot.
Well, I mean, you look at our military, it's the same thing, right? Not everybody's going to be a Navy SEAL, but you can still be part of the Navy.
That's right. That's
yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So Hashi, you're teaching full time now?
I teach full time now. Yes.
Yeah. So, and your dojo's in New Jersey?
New Jersey, Union, New Jersey.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I still have not been able to get out there and come to your school and visit. I have to.
Well, we gotta fix that.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and as well as have you to my school as well.
Yeah.
But Dwayne, I just did a seminar at a friend of mine's school, and Hashi taught, and he did his a psi seminar on the metal psi, and amazing, just such a great time, and all different nuances of the movements and everything. And to me, I brought 4 of my students, I think 3 or 4, and they were all just like, wow, they had a whole different perspective on the weapon that I teach on a regular basis. So it was interesting to see like how it opens people's minds, and Hashi is teaching something very similar but different, and how people are like, wow, I've never seen it before. Like students, you could have probably said some of the same things that I did, and they would go, wow, I never heard that before. But just training with you and being around you was just a great experience. So I know, and you do that often, you train and teach at other different seminars. So what's your thought too, like with teaching at other schools, when they don't do anything at all like what you do, system is totally different. What is your approach? Like, how do you approach that kind of seminar or teaching?
Well, I just try to get a feel in terms of what people's comfort levels are. If this case in point, if I'm teaching the psi, for instance, and there are people there who have never touched the psi before, then I meet them where they are.
Okay.
This way they're comfortable, and then of course it opens up those channels of learning. If I step into an environment where everybody is very familiar, and the language, air quotes, sort of the same thing, then we can just let it become more organic, and I can just take off and do certain things that everybody's somewhat comfortable with. Right. So, it really depends on the environment. I try to get a feel beforehand, like, well, who am I working with?
Okay.
What's their experience level?
Great. And you teach to the group, obviously.
And I teach to the group. That's correct.
Their ability. That's awesome.
Yes.
Fantastic. Yes. I love it. Yeah, we had such a good time. So I look forward to doing that again. And I look forward to training with you at Masters Unite as well, coming up in August, that our good friend Andrew Stigliano teaches.
Yes.
So we had a conversation, and I'm not bringing it up for negativity, but we do find a lot of martial arts these days is, everyone's calling this one a McDojo and that one a fake and this one that, and there's a lot of negativity, the drama around martial arts. And you and I had a great conversation of how we stay away from that and ignore it and so on. But what's your personal philosophy on that? Like, how do you stay away? Do you not listen? Do you just ignore? Like, what is it for you to stay away from the drama?
The drama is very interesting because, again, it speaks to just the humanity of people being involved in something that they're passionate about. For me, and I always tell people this often, I choose to have peace. And for a long time, that peace was often disrupted because of various reasons. I'll be brought into things that were defined as being dramatic. But I think if, you have to be the captain of your own ship. If you choose not to be involved with certain things and it's going to be disruptive to your own state of mind, to your own peace, then just don't be a part of it. But, when people have those opinions and they go out and they want to expound upon that stuff, their opinions, and of course, there are some places or certain institutions that resemble what they're saying, but, you have to stop and look at, well, why is this being done? Because when you look in at schools or businesses or operations, nobody goes into business to fail.
Right.
And if you go into business, part of which you want to be able to monetize and earn a living and be successful. And we equate success with being able to monetize. Now, there are different extremes to that. You see, you don't want to be exploiting individuals. You can't do that. And I often tell my students, my family, my kids, not all money is good money. You see, because at the end of the day, for me, I feel that I have to be able to lay my head down and look myself in the mirror and be okay with that. You see, and there are things and opportunities that I walked away from because I just was not comfortable. You follow? So, that's just my perspective. But
I love that.
It does not take away from the fact that business models can be expansive and do so many different things that allow people to, of course, their journey is their journey. If their objective is to do certain things with their martial art business and prowess, then so be it. But I try my best to stay away from that. There are times I may have something to say, but I measure out, like, what good is that going to do? Now, I'm not saying that we should all be silent observers.
Right.
Because, there's a time you need to speak up. There's a time you need to, support what you believe in. And I think that's very, very important.
I think I know, I'm just going to really say this really quick. I know, like, on social media for myself, I have some social media rules. And when those things pop up, I will take those conversations off of.
Yes.
And look, you want to speak on the phone, you want to speak in person. I'm not going to type back and forth and try to talk with you about your point and my point. Like, I'm not going to do that. And if you're not willing to meet with me, be it on the phone or in person, then, it must not be important enough to you to get your point across either.
Right. That's true. And a lot of the stuff is very hateful, a lot of the stuff is very hurtful, should I say.
Well, that's why I'm so impressed with Allie, because he's got a ton of friends around his area where his school is at with other school owners, and they all get along. I mean, maybe not all, but they mostly get along. And, unfortunately, I've had run-ins with people in our town, and it's like, I'm not doing anything to you. You know what I mean?
Well, I think though, and by the way, it's not easy. Again, it starts with developing a relationship. So, like, to first be transparent that I'm not, like, I had a dinner, a fellowship dinner at my school where I invited all the martial artists that I knew and that I could get in touch with. And it was interesting. It was nothing but a dinner. I paid for all the food and I just wanted to get together and hang out. And I would get so many behind the scenes conversations, people calling me like, no, really, what is this about? Like, what are you selling? What are you trying? What is the I'm like, no, guys, I just want to say thank you and have you all in my school. But and a lot of people didn't come because they didn't believe that it was just a get together.
Right.
But we just had breakfast this morning. There's 6 school owners at breakfast this morning where we just hang out, and we talked about movies today, a few things about seminars and tournaments, but mostly really just hanging out as friends, like-minded friends,
Right.
and that's
Yeah.
super important.
That's healthy. That's very
Yeah,
healthy.
you need it. And by the way, who's going to understand you better than someone who's gone through it?
That's
Like
right.
when Panchi, when you and I talk, and
That's right.
we go through the same thing. We might be feeling the same way. Dwayne and I during COVID, we were a big sounding board for each other during COVID, where he would call me and I would call him. We were nervous. What are we doing? What could we fix? How could we do this? And it was good to have him in my corner. And I hope I was able to do the same for him.
Vice versa, definitely.
Yeah. So, but anyway, I wanted to quickly tell you, Hanchi, your brother had texted and said good afternoon to everybody. So it's great to see him on there. We had Sensei Ingram. He also said God bless to you as well.
Yes.
And a whole bunch of other senseis, Sensei Murphy and Mohammed, and people from all over the world, actually.
Wow.
So we had Ryan Blanchard, from a good friend of mine from, he's from Illinois, not Illinois. He's from Cajun martial arts, New Orleans.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're everybody from all over are tuning in and saying hello and all that.
Yes.
So we're running out of time. We have about 9 minutes left. So
Yes.
did you have anything that you wanted to talk about as far as your personal philosophy, or what your goal is and your mission nowadays, and that you're doing, or anything upcoming or whatever?
Well, first and foremost, I always try to allow myself to be involved with something that's a vehicle of positivity. My school, my dojo, as I tell people often enough, is that we try to establish a community or a culture, where, we are uplifting each other. The students, the peers, is very uplifting. And it may sound trite and corny to some, but I hold on to that, because there's a lot of negativity in the martial arts, but there's a lot of good in the martial art as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of good in the martial arts, and it does a lot of good for a lot of people.
Right.
And we all have our own journey. We all have our own prize. And I was telling a friend yesterday, you have to keep your eye on your prize, not nobody else's prize.
Right.
We all have our own prize.
Yes.
So part of which, when we engage in the martial arts and accept it as a journey, part of our life journey, then just try to extract as much as you can that's going to be positive, that's going to help build you, and it's going to be transformative.
Right.
Because being a martial artist is about transformation.
Mm.
We transform ourselves externally, and in hopes that we are transforming ourselves internally.
Mm.
And I said it before on different interviews, part of which, for me, our spirituality is our first measure of defense. And it's important that we protect that.
Yes.
And part of which you want to protect your peace. So outside noise can sometimes make its way, and it is challenging. We all know that it's challenging. We know that, the landscape of being a martial arts instructor or being within the culture of the martial arts, there's a lot of distractions.
Yes.
There's a lot of negative forces out there. But, part of the discipline, when we spoke earlier in the conversation, one of the things we speak about is what discipline, and even as instructors, we're 4 or 5 decades deep into this. We still got to maintain that focus. Okay, what's the discipline? The discipline is, keeping an eye on our own prize,
right?
And try to eliminate that outside noise. And I do my best to do that.
It's hard though.
It's challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah,
there's so many different factors involved.
Yeah, my yoga teacher, who is no longer with us, when he passed away, was 124 years old.
Wow.
And Swami Buaji, it was one man that I met and automatically was in love with. Just thought he was the best. He was great. But he used to say to me, and it was a very old style way of saying it. He used to say, Ali, while you're worrying about what people are thinking or saying, they're out tap dancing, having the time of their lives, paying you absolutely no mind. They dropped their comment. They said that hurtful statement.
Yeah. And they keep moving and they walk away. Yeah.
They don't care at all. But yet we internalize it.
We internalize it. You take it to heart. You know, especially if you're a caring person, you look at those things and it becomes very hurtful. And maybe that's their intention. They know that you're probably going to be hurt by it. That's what they do. Right. But my choice is peace.
Yes.
And I express that every chance I get.
I love it.
We have to seek out peace, and I've learned these lessons. The biggest lesson I learned before my wife passed away, she battled cancer for about maybe 6 years. Wow. What an inspiration.
Hmm.
That altered my way of thinking.
Yeah.
So that measure of looking at that, I use that to make sure that I stay consistent on how I express myself as a martial artist, as a believer. You know, whether you guys believe in God, I'm a believer of God, and I try to put that first.
Dwayne's martial arts school is a Christian martial arts school.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know, I mean, yeah, don't we realize now that, and as you get older and you have less life at the end of the journey,
Yes.
and you and more behind you than you do have in front of you. I try to experience happiness every day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to because it's part of the day and part of your job or part of whatever difficult conversations or whatever it is to have. But the majority of time, it's a choice to be happy.
That's right.
You could focus on the good or you could focus on the bad. There's always bad. You could always find it. All you have to do is choose. You could go
That's
out
right.
and find it in a flash.
That's right.
But to experience happiness, that's harder these days,
Yes, it is.
isn't it? It's more difficult to really just experience it and really remind yourself.
Well, and Ali, you said, you know, we have more behind us than we do ahead of us. And you're right with regards to time.
Right.
But I think with the right perspective, we actually have more ahead of us than we had behind us, because we can actually look backwards and appreciate things, one, backwards more. But as we're moving through time now,
Yes.
we have a different perspective that we can actually get more out of it than we did when we were younger, because we were so much in that bottle. Now we're able to take ourselves out of the bottle a little bit better as we get older.
Right. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, someone, Hanshi, just wrote, not someone, Rick Kellerman from 10 Tigers Kung Fu. He said, "So sorry for your loss. It's so inspiring that you choose to find something so positive within a tragedy."
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but Dwayne, you're right though. Like, you know, I look at my life and I always say, okay, how can I make this a good day? You know, like what can I do to enjoy? And we were just watching a TV show last night, my family and I said it was about the 70s and the hippies and music back in the 70s. I said, I would love to go back in time and experience that love era, but I would like to be 25 years old at least, so that I was mature enough to realize I lived through it, but I was the little kid. I didn't have any idea. So imagine being able to go back in time, knowing what to look for and appreciate. That would change everything. So thinking about the future, that's how we have to look at it and go, how can we appreciate what we have?
Yeah.
Well, and I think we have to also, the older we get, we got to be careful because of everything that we've gone through, that we are looking for the things that we are grateful for, because it's so much easier to, and we all know older people that are negative and crusty and you know, they're just not nice to be around anymore. And I wonder if they were like that when they were our age or even earlier. So you know, I just think that it's really important as we get older that we don't get that way. We really have to look at the things that we're grateful for and that we appreciate, and find, you know, like you had said, find the good in life and then demonstrate that and share it with others.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Hanshi, how do people get in touch with you if they want to just reach out through your website or
through the website, through Duncan Martial Arts website?
What is the actual domain? DuncanMartialArts.com?
Yeah, www.duncanmartialarts.com.
Great.
And then I have my Facebook page. The people usually reach me through there. And then I have.
Is it under your name, the Facebook page? Or
Yes,
is it
Gregory
under
Duncan.
Okay.
Gregory
So
Duncan.
people could reach out to you. They can message you there.
Yes,
they can get in touch in case they want to do a seminar or have you in.
Right.
Which I highly recommend. It would be life-changing for your school. So they'd be in touch with you. And then if they want to do a seminar and train with you, coming up in August is the Masters Unite.
Masters Unite.
You'll be there on Long Island for the Long Islanders. But if not, I'm sure you're going to be doing different seminars throughout the country and so on. So it was an honor, you know, Hanshi, to have you on. I mean, I consider us friends and for a long time. We know each other for like 40 plus
A
years.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I look back, I saw a photo. I remember you doing a seminar at Storm King, and you were doing ukemi-waza, flips and falls and so on.
Yeah.
And we were on those grungy, sweaty mats.
Yeah.
We were in the basement of Storm King. But I saw the photos of you and I have to dig it out. And we were so young.
We were young.
Oh my God. It was that has to be 35 years ago.
It's going back because you realize the Storm King event, we started doing that in 1991.
Wow.
You know,
So that's when I opened my
1991.
school.
Yeah, around that time. So we're
32 years
we're
ago.
young guys, you know. With,
Oh my God.
a lot of energy and no gray hair or nothing.
Exactly. And
That's when I graduated high school, 1991.
without the injuries and the pain and the stuff
That's
that I
right.
wake up with every morning.
Yes.
That reminds me of all my hardcore training.
Yeah.
But it was a great time. So it's been great taking this journey. I hope that we can continue for many, many, many years together and do
That's
things and achieve greatness. But you're awesome. I appreciate you very
appreciate
much. So
Thank you.
thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Yeah,
nice
thank
meeting you as well. God bless you.
You have a great
God
day.
bless.
Take care.
Grace and
Bye.
peace.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Martial Arts School Owner Talk podcast. This would not be possible if it weren't for the support of our amazing sponsors. Please check out Elite Insights for all your website needs. They can be reached at eliteinsights.com. Add Health Coaching, helping school owners create a new and easy to implement revenue stream for your school. Visit addhealthcoaching.com. Lead Hunter Media, your online digital marketer and content provider. Visit leadhuntermedia.com. Academy Kings Growth Consulting and Management Group. They can be reached at academykings.com. And Spark Membership, hands down the best martial arts software for school owner management on the planet. They can be reached at sparkmembership.com. We will see you next time.